Hello there, my name is Lewis Wieland, and for the last 30 years, I've published the official relocation guides for Atlanta that are distributed by the First Multiple Listing Service of Atlanta. We have four different publications, one for Gwinnett County, one for North Fulton, one for Atlanta, and one for Cobb County that is published in conjunction with the Cobb Association of Realtors. And their magazines are on the First Multiple Listing Service website. They're on my website, atlantacommunityprofiles.com. And we send them out regularly to realtors via email, digitally, and for the benefit of realtors to use in their activities with their agents. They can forward the magazines to the realtors. They define the counties and the communities, the schools, the recreational activities, and basically just helping newcomers, especially, whether for business or pleasure, learn about Atlanta. I'm also a commercial realtor with KW Commercial, and my area of focus is multifamily and land. And so if I can help you with any of your real estate needs, my email address is lewwieland@kw.com. And appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today and provide information about live, work, and play in the metro area. So today our guest is somebody that I've gotten to know over the last few years, Monique Sheffield. She is a commissioner for Cobb County, District 4. And welcome to the show, Monique. Great to have you on the program. Thanks for taking time. I was at the commission meeting this morning, and I really got a lot better understanding of some of the work that you do, and obviously very responsible and important work that is done by the commission. First of all, let me just introduce you to our audience, and then we can talk about what exactly does the commission do and how people can interact with you guys in a professional way. So Monique has been a District 4 resident for over 20 years. She currently serves on the Lindsay 6th Grade Academy School of Counseling Advisory Committee. She's a past president of 2 HOA communities. She's volunteers with Keep Cobb Beautiful and other civic organizations. She's a graduate of Cobb 101 Citizens Government Academy and Cobb County Public Safety Academy. She served on the Board of Zoning Appeals from 2017 to 2019. She's co-owner of Sheffield Realty Group, a boutique real estate brokerage firm located in Mapleton. She's a certified instructor with the Georgia Real Estate Commission and has a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. She is a resident of Mapleton with her husband, Eric, and both are members of the Word of Faith Family Worship Cathedral in Austell. So it's an honor to have you on the show, Monique, and I appreciate you taking time from your very busy schedule to come on and help people understand what the commission does. And basically, let's start with, how does one become a commissioner? First of all, let's start with that.
Okay. Excuse me, and I apologize in advance. I have a little tickle in my throat. Okay, so there are 2 ways that I can answer that question. But obviously, you're voted into this position. But as far as my personal journey, I'll share with you that it goes years and years and years back. And it's probably born out of me being a real estate agent, a real estate broker, because as many as you know, once you're involved with real estate, you're not just committed to buying and purchasing property, but you actually are committed to the community. So I'd lived out in Powder Springs in the early 2000s. And this was the pivotal moment for me. I was driving through my community and there was a piece of litter just kind of on the street. So, I kind of passed it 1 or 2 times, and then eventually I just stopped and picked it up. And that led to me wanting to serve on the HOA board. And being on an HOA board, obviously, you are just really committed to your community. So that that birthed a desire for me to become more and more involved with not just my HOA, but with all things Powder Springs. So I started attending the town hall meetings of the then Commissioner Cupid, who's our county chair now. I attended several of her meetings, and that led to my board appointment to the Board of Zoning Appeals. And after some conversations, it was asked of me to run. And I had zero interest because I dislike politics. So I had zero interest in running for office. But I came to realize, I've come to realize that what I'm operating in is my purpose. And generally, when that happens, you kind of kick and scream to getting there, but eventually you will land in that space.
Okay, well, we appreciate people who are contributing to the community like yourself, and I know I saw you at work today on the board in the Cobb Commissioner office there, and very impressive. It's sort of like a courtroom, and very impressive and a little bit intimidating. But so, what advice would you give an agent like myself who needs to make a change in their zoning for a particular property that they might be listing?
Sure. Actually, Lou, before I do that, I think you might have asked me to share a little bit about what I do as commissioner. So,
That's a good idea.
as commissioner, we're like the top tier of government in Cobb County. So, the Board of Commissioners is a 5-member board. We are an all-female board. The first time ever in Cobb County's history, but we have 5-member board. There are 4 districts in Cobb County. There is a commissioner to represent each of the commission districts, and then we have a chairperson, obviously, for the county. So there are a lot of responsibilities that come along with being a commissioner, but what I will say, the top 3 areas of responsibility for us is ensuring the public safety. And it's not just police fire, but it's also animal safety or environmental safety. For some of my realtors out there who've attempted to sell property near the Sterigenics plant, that would be a great example of where environmental safety would be a concern that we would need to address as a board of commissioners. So we have ensuring public safety. The second part is appropriating the budget. Cobb County right now has a $1.2 billion budget, but we have a lot of expenses to go along with that. And our greatest expense comes out of the Department of Traffic department with repaving roads, etc. So we appropriate the budget. As most might not know, the budget is actually the chairperson's budget, but the Board of Commissioners will vote on that budget adoption. But even along with that, there are meetings. Like I had a meeting today with a department head for a budget ask. So leading up to the budget, we'll have meetings. We'll hear from the departments on what their budgetary needs are, whether it's staff, whether it's equipment, etc. So we have ensuring the budget, public safety, and then finally, land use and zoning, and exercising our constitutional powers, police powers. As we all remember, when we studied real estate, we have police power, and we actually exercise that our constitutional powers through police power. But what's interesting is I'd like for people to understand, and I know all your realtors understand this, you guys know this, but for the general public, just because it's your property doesn't necessarily give you the right to do whatever you want to do on your property. And that leads us to our land use and zoning ordinances, our comp plan, which Lou, you attended today. So we still have power in how we develop and maintain the integrity of Cobb County.
That's a lot of responsibility. I know if you own a house, you can't just tear it down and build up an apartment building on your land.
That is exactly right. That is exactly right. And of course, there are a lot of things that are in between all of those things. There is definitely a lot of responsibility. You have constituent services and so many other things. But that third responsibility or area that I mentioned leads me directly into your question with rezoning, and how do you go about rezoning a property? So essentially, with our zoning districts, and there are several districts, right? So we have, and this is about to be alphabet soup, but and stop me if I'm giving too many details. I'm the queen of that. But we have different zoning categories. We have VDLR, which is very low density residential. That's from 0 to 2 units per acre. Then we have LDR, which is the more popular zoning district. LDR is from 2 to 5 units per acre.
Okay.
And then we have medium density residential. No, I'm sorry. Let me back up. VLDR is 0 to 2. LDR is 2 to 2.5. MDR is 2.5 to 5. And high density residential is 5 and above. So we also have a category for RM, and that's residential multifamily. Now you'll see a zoning district for RM8, which is multifamily, but up to 8 units per acre. But as far as apartments are concerned, the zoning category for apartments are RM12. That's been the more popular zoning category, and that's residential multifamily at 12 units per acre.
Okay. Okay, so that makes sense.
Now, in terms of zoning, in terms of changing the zoning category, you would need to submit a zoning application along with the site plan to the county planning and zoning division. So the process from there is once you submit your zoning application. Now, before submitting the zoning application, I would encourage people to do their due diligence to, one, find out the current zoning category, right? Obviously, you need to know that, but not just the current that category for the subject parcel, but also the parcel surrounding the subject parcel. So if you have your subject parcel, right, that's currently, and we'll use the Riverside project, for example, property. If you have a current parcel that's zoned, let's say R20, and every parcel around that parcel, the adjacent parcels, are also zoned R20, it's going to be very difficult, nearly impossible, to have your R20 zoned as an RM12 because the adjacent parcels don't support that zoning district. So for the apartments, now you may have parcels that are currently zoned HDR, like the Riverside development, for example. So it's much more likely that the subject parcel on Riverside would be zoned to be compatible with the other HDR zoning categories. So the point that I'm making is the likelihood of you receiving approval for your zoning district will depend on the adjacent parcels and also the future land use of that particular parcel.
So you have to, there are a lot of moving parts with the application and the engineering report. Tell us about, do you recommend getting a lawyer? Do you recommend getting an engineering company? Or you have to send something about a plat proposal of some kind? What exactly do you do with that?
You know, I've seen where applicants would represent themselves. And I also find that for most of our applications, they're represented by an attorney. You know, I wouldn't say one way or the other you should get an attorney, but what I will say for our more complicated zoning applications, they're represented by attorneys. But we may have an application, for example, one of the more recent zonings that was approved in December, where we had a lot that's currently zoned R20 and R30, right? Two zoning categories on one parcel. So applicant requested that the entire parcel is zoned to R30. That's pretty much low-hanging fruit. No big deal there. You're not really looking to change the entire category to multifamily or to townhouses. So in an instance like that is where I would see a lot of applicants represent themselves because it's very low-hanging fruit. But I find that if there is a parcel that might have topography challenges, which I understand may be the case, at least in some of the parcels near the Riverside City View corridor, there are some topography challenges. Usually when I see a lot that has those type of challenges is where the applicant would hire an engineer and an attorney.
By the way, for our listeners, she's referring to two of my listings that we're trying to rezone, and which led to us getting involved, and having conversation. And originally we met, a friend of mine was trying to find a church, and we met and talked, and that was a few years ago, I guess. And but anyway, we've been working together here for a while, trying to navigate the process. Now, do you recommend, are there different lawyers for different property types that you recommend, or do zoning lawyers kind of do all kinds of property types, or what?
It's the latter. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't recommend an attorney, obviously, because then if it comes before me by that attorney, there may be a perception of a conflict of interest there. But with zoning attorneys, they generally represent clients with different types of zoning requests.
Okay. Tell us about surveys and how useful they are in making a request for a zoning change, and how does one go about getting a survey done, and what kind of companies do that?
Well, a surveyor, land surveyor company, that would be one of the items that you'll need to submit with your packet for your application. We definitely need to see the property boundaries of the parcel that you're looking to rezone. So you would definitely need to have a survey submitted. But what I'll tell you is on the county's website for the zoning application packet, there's a list of documents that you'll need to submit along with your application. So it's pretty well spelled out.
Okay, so one of the things that came into play on my two listings that would be of interest to our listeners and viewers would be the topography, and how do you take into consideration the topography and the type of zoning? And because sometimes, in our case, the terrain was rough or is rough, so it's not too expensive for residential. It has to have a higher density to help offset the cost of changing the topography. So is that a criteria, or how do you deal with that?
Well, that would really be on the applicant, but what I'll share with you is there was a zoning actually right across the street from you on City View.
Mm-hmm.
Near, excuse me, pardon me, near the Super 8 Hotel. So a few years ago, actually my first year as commissioner in 2021, I met with developers that wanted to build an apartment community right on City View. And I don't know if you remember seeing the zoning signs at that time, but it's like nearly across the street from your property on City View. That one had a lot of topography challenges, and not just topo challenges, but there was also granite or rock there, which really limited. And I don't know if you're dealing with that on your property at all.
Yes, we are.
So, which obviously, when you have those type of obstacles, it really limits what you can do at the property. So we had a zoning application, which was approved. It was approved for multifamily RM12 category. And in fact, I want to say that was one that we updated. Yeah, that one is the one that we passed today at our comprehensive plan meeting to zone that as HDR. So it was for not single family, excuse me. It was for an apartment community. Very, very nice community. Very Class A apartments, pool, workout room. There was retail space for a coffee shop. It was a very nice development that was approved. And this was on the heels of COVID when the cost of materials were continuing to incline. And between the time of approval and they actually met with the contractor, they were priced out of the development. So they withdrew the contract. But the point that I'd like to make is when the application was submitted, the applicant had an engineer and an architect to submit plans to work around the topography challenges and also the rock. So with one of the buildings, even though it appeared to be above grade or at grade, because of the topography challenges, there was a level that was below grade. So then you have the obstacle or the challenge of the max building height, which is like 39 feet. So there was a lot of kind of nuances happening here, but because of the topography challenge and one of the levels being below grade, obviously the building was higher than the 39 feet that's allowed by code. But those are some of the workarounds, and that's usually done when you submit your site plan, you get with your engineer, and then you submit that to the county. The county will also have a developers meeting where they would meet with the applicant, and generally the applicant will have their attorney there, the engineer, the architect, and they will meet with the county and the county staff. And at that meeting, you'll have Planning and Zoning Division. You'll have a representative from DOT, you'll have a representative from water, a representative from fire. So all of the county staff sits around the table along with the applicant and discuss the application and provide feedback on the application. So that's a scenario where DOT would say, hey, you may need to widen the entrance at this location because based on our analysis, there may not be enough room for vehicles to swing out of that exit. So that's where additional feedback is shared with the applicant. Then once the meeting is concluded with staff, generally the applicant would go back with their engineers and make changes based on staff's recommendation. It goes before the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission is a body of 5 people. They're regular citizens. They're not elected into office. Instead, they're appointed by each of the commissioners and the chair to represent their respective districts. So much like the Board of Commissioners meeting, the Planning Commission meets in the Board of Commissioners room. They will hear the zoning requests, the zoning presentations. And at that point, either the Planning Commission will ask for additional information and update to the site plan and further instruction by the applicant. Once that's done and the Planning Commission renders their recommendation, whether they recommend it moves to the commissioners or they recommend denial, in either case, it's then presented to me and my fellow Board of Commissioners. And that's when we will make the final decision on the zoning request.
Okay, well, for you people watching, you might want to watch this show a few times to understand and digest everything you just said. Make notes of it because there's a lot there. But let's move on to another subject too, which is environmental issues. A lot of times we do have those factors to deal with. Can you help us understand how to cope with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because when you speak about environmental, like we would have a zoning application. Actually, I'm dealing with one right now that was rezoned a couple of years ago. Now, here's what's happening with that application. So you guys are familiar with Ashton Woods, the developer.
Sure.
Okay, well, there was this parcel, right? And on this parcel was a tire shop, which also did oil changes. Okay. Part of the rezoning was that that tire shop was supposed to be torn down and replaced with a different type of commercial use. But since there was oil change activity at that property, we can't just simply say tear it down. Now we have to, and when I say we, this is the recommendation or requirement of the county to require the applicant to get a soil test study, right? And that's whether it's a gas station or any type of location that once had some type of chemicals at that location, and now they're turning it into or wish to have a residential development there, they would have to go through an environmental study.
So now, how would they go about doing that? They would
have to hire an environmentalist,
environmental,
an environmental consulting firm. Yeah.
Okay. Are they tend to be engineering firms or what? Those.
Well, not necessarily engineering firms, but if you have an engineer, I'm sure the engineer would be a great source. Or you can just simply Google the information. I'll tell you, the Atlanta Regional Commission, ARC, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that organization, but the Atlanta Regional Commission is an organization that connects 11 metro counties. So there are times where we may need approval from the ARC to move forward with a project in my district or in Cobb County. One of the things that come to mind, which I am especially pleased and happy about, is a regional trailhead in Mableton on Mableton Parkway and Discovery Boulevard near the Chattahoochee River. So that is a part of a 100-mile project from Coweta to Beaufort. To Noonan. So part of that will pass through my district. Since it is on the Chattahoochee, I needed to get clearance from the ARC, the Atlanta Regional Commission, before we can move forward with the project, because since it's water, that required approvals, that required studies. We can't just rezone a property without making sure that all of those things are checked off. And in fact, Lou, that was one of the items that we voted on today, because it was formerly zoned PI, which is priority industrial. So since that's the future use, if we are presented with a zoning application, which I was presented a few years ago for a distribution warehouse, right, which fits that PI category. But the community kind of pushed back a little bit, and quite candidly, so did I, because I just think that for me, representing South Cobb, to have a concrete warehouse block is not the welcome necessarily that I wanted people to have into Cobb County. So we're really excited to know that there will be an 8-acre trailhead. But the point that I'm making is that it runs along the Chattahoochee River, so they're required clearance from the state.
Okay. Well, today we had an interesting session that I watched in your hearing. I saw a young lady come up to protest or request about a traffic problem with a zoning change and congestion,
Sure.
et cetera. Why don't you explain that? Because there might be people who would want to do that sometime.
Explain what exactly the process, or
Yeah, what happened? What was she addressing? And she was apparently not too happy about a change that would increase the traffic over in her property.
Okay, so what you're talking about, just for the benefit of the people that were not there, and let me just go back and share that what we did today was basically clean up our zoning categories. So with our Cobb County Comprehensive Plan, it's a 40-year plan, but every 5 years or every year or so, we'll go back and we'll clean up the plan just based on any zoning applications that we might have approved that will not fit into the future land use for that particular property. So with this person, back in 2021, actually, I was vice chair of the commission at the time, and this is one of the zoning applications that I presided over. But there was a development in East Cobb, and it was purchased by a church, Andy Stanley. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Andy
I attend
Stanley,
his church.
but oh, okay. All right. So it's very personal for you then. Yeah. So with Andy Stanley, they purchased a church, and part of what they wanted to do was make that into a multi-use development. So the current, or before today, the property was zoned as neighborhood, neighborhood commercial, neighborhood activity center, excuse me, and LDR. So it was two zoning categories. You have neighborhood activity center, and there at a neighborhood activity center is where you'll find your dry cleaners, your supermarkets, etc. A use that the majority of the community would utilize. And then you have LDR, which is low density residential. So what it was zoned as, and follow me here because this is really going to sound like alphabet soup. It was zoned as PI for public institution to satisfy the fact that the church will have the property. Also MDR for medium density residential, because there is a plan to have townhouses at this property, and also LDR, low density residential. So the concern for the person that spoke this morning was, why is it that there is a push for density in the particular area? It's not that it's a push for density. And I just want people to understand that the commissioners are not pushing for any type of zoning, right? These are zoning applications that we are receiving from property owners or from people who are interested in developing the property. So it's not that the commissioners are going out searching and trying to identify projects that are dense, right? We are just here to review the applications and ensure that it meets the comp plan and the future land use of the particular property. Understanding that Cobb County is growing. Cobb County currently is at 785,000 residents, 785. And we're projected to tap out at 1 million people by 2050. So the question becomes, how do we get in front of the growth? It's not just Cobb County, it's across the metro area. It's across the country. People are living longer, people are healthier. So our plan, or part of my responsibility as commissioner, is to ensure that we're keeping with the pace of what's happening in our county. Each application is different on its own merit. With this particular property, it will also have a park. And I don't remember off the top of my head how many acres for this particular property. But we cleaned up the zoning category. So now it will have a church. It will have residential units, which are townhouses. It will also have a park, and it will also have a commercial component. So there was also concern that there's traffic in Cobb County. I think that with zoning these type of applications, we're shrinking community, so to speak. So now where the residents in this immediate area have access to a park, they're not necessarily traveling to another part of the county to access a different park, thereby taking more vehicles off the road. So I think that as we move forward and we review these zoning applications, each has to stand on its own merit. Obviously, there is a public engagement. The public is free to attend the Planning Commission meetings as well as the Board of Commissioners meeting. And for my district, I host a monthly zoning meeting, which I've coined In the Zone. So I meet with my constituents virtually on the third Wednesday of every month to talk about our zoning applications. And at that meeting, I also have my planning commissioner, Michael Hughes, to join me at this community meeting. And it's also like an educational opportunity for those that are interested in learning more about zoning. But it also, the primary reason it's done is to give residents an opportunity to voice their concerns about any zoning applications that I may hear in District 4.
How can we find out about that and get on the invitation list to that?
You're on it. I'll make sure that Rwanda, and actually we just had a meeting last week, but I'll make sure you receive the invitation. And
what about all these listeners out there that are listening? How can they get on? I'm sure lots of people would want to know about that and attend that. And I know quite a few of my realtor friends would love to learn more about that and get. How do they get involved in that and hear about it?
Yeah, absolutely. What they can do, they can send an email to my assistant. Her name is Rwanda, and I'll spell her name, and her email address is rwanda.mcintosh @cobbcounty.org. So that's rwanda.mcintosh@cobbcounty.org. And Lou, what I'm willing to do for you and my fellow realtors, if you want to have, I guess like zoning 101, I can put together a presentation and do a special type of presentation for you. But they're more than welcome to join my meetings, my community meetings, because then you'll learn about the concerns of the community. Right. And I think it's a great way to, and actually, that's part of the reason I kind of ended up on the Board of Zoning Appeals, because at the time, real estate was really, really hot. This was before the open doors, before Zillow and all of those guys came in and started taking over. I thought to myself, there's so many of us out here. How can I not necessarily separate, but how can I have the leg up on my fellow realtors when I'm competing for a listing agreement? So I immediately thought about zoning. Hey, wouldn't I look smart if I'm trying to secure a listing and I say, hey, well, do you know that there's a rezoning going on down the street from you? So that's kind of how that door opened up for me.
Yeah, I belong
So
to.
I just made a commitment to learn about zoning.
Yeah, I belong to some realtor groups that would love to have you come and give that presentation too. And
Yeah, sure.
we'll work towards that goal. I appreciate it. The only thing left I wanted to ask you about, and our time is up. You've been very gracious with your time, but how do tax revenues for zoning changes play into it at all or not?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Tax revenues, in other words, a particular type of zoning might generate more money in tax revenues.
Oh, I see.
So is
Well,
that a
commercial
factor?
is all. I gotcha, but commercial obviously is at the top of the food chain because the commercial tax bracket is very different from residential, right? So if you're talking like single family residences versus multifamily, yeah, there is a difference because multifamily is also considered commercial, even though it's quote unquote residential. So there is a difference in tax break. But here's what I'll also share with you. So when we review applications as commissioners, we're not allowed to consider any type of financial cost to anything. And the reason I'm sharing that with you is because I talk to constituents, and the question sometimes I'm asked is, well, why didn't you ask them how much it cost? Well, the Robert Rules of Law or Order that we have to abide by as commissioners prohibit us from discussing or even asking or considering the cost of any development. So obviously, realistically, is it in the back of your mind? Yeah, you can have a pretty good idea of how much something costs, but our decisions are never to be based on the cost associated with the development.
What a great pleasure having you on the show, Monique. You are just a wonderful source of information and delightful lady.
Thank you.
Appreciate very much your taking time and with us, and would love to
Absolutely.
have you on the show from time to time. You know, maybe we could talk about
My
some
pleasure.
topics such as recent cases that people might be interested in hearing about and learning from. So we'll be in touch about
Yeah.
that and having you back from time to time. And people love talking about this. I know commercial agents definitely do, and also the citizens in general. So thank you very, very much, and appreciate it. And so again, if you want to learn more about the commissioners and the commission, the website, what is the website, the main, you have quite a few different pages on the site. What is the Cobb County,
Yeah, it's cobbcounty.org.
cobbcounty.org?
Cobbcounty.org is the county site, and on it you'll find pages for the different commissioners, communications, the different departments, zoning, for example, as well as the zoning applications.
Okay. If you have any requests for topics out there, what you're watching and that we could talk about and get Monique back and talk about, send it to Lou Wieland at kw.com, and we'll get Monique back, hopefully, if you can find time, and then to address some of your questions about zoning, because it is, you know, it's not that easy to navigate through all of these processes. So thank you again.
Right.
It was a pleasure indeed. And thank you very much for watching at AtlantaCommunityProfiles.com. Have a nice day.